Look at what stories are making the headlines this Friday. It's the ITV News at 10.
Donald Trump to appear in court next Tuesday, the first former president to face crime. They're connected to hush money paid to adult Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. There have been howls of anger from Republicans and Trump supporters and defiance from his lawyer. New York is bracing for an appearance which puts Donald Trump back centre stage ahead of an election year, a position he knows only too well and doesn't usually regret. Dan will bring us all the details, also on News at 10 tonight.
I know with 100% certainty that people were terrified to have interactions with him.
As Deputy PM Dominic Raab waits for judgment on allegations of bullying, a former member of his staff speaks to Anushka. Ex-England cricket captain Michael Vaughan cleared of using racist language. The scandal of those with autism and learning disabilities locked up because we don't have enough carers, how the government is failing them.
There was abusing him and nothing I could say or do was stopping it. He asked for help, he was begging me to bring him home and I couldn't.
And what lies beneath, how a boom in biodiversity is being helped by a wee dram in the Highlands.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. It is a mark of just how uncharted it all is that there is still a lot we don't know about the indictment of Donald Trump. Never before has a former president faced criminal charges. Even the charges themselves we won't know until next week. What is clear tonight is that once again the United States is bracing for the kind of division and bravado some had hoped were firmly in the political past. Mr. Trump, at his Florida estate tonight, is due before a New York court on Tuesday over allegations around hush money payments made to the adult film star Stormy Daniels. He'll have his fingerprints recorded, his mugshot taken, but no handcuffs, we're told, following arrangements with the Secret Service.
The fulcrum around which the future of the United States now pivots is here, the criminal court in Manhattan, where former President Trump will now be charged. It is a case which already divides a nation. The political rift already apparent from the streets of New York to the gates of Trump's estate at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. News of the indictment caught many, including President Trump himself, off guard. His initial hastily typed reaction, complete with a spelling mistake, described it as an attack on our country, the likes of which has never been seen before. Tonight, he reposted a stirring video of himself with the caption, "He never backed down for you." The message, he'll fight the charges and the election with equal vigour. The Trump family is keen to portray a criminal charge as a political attack.
This is like communist level.
Today, one of his loyal supporters acknowledged how it's possible the police mugshot of Donald Trump might be an awkward campaign image.
They just want a mugshot. And I hope to God that President Donald J. Trump smiles as pretty for that picture because they're going to use it in all their campaign ads. So I want my president to look good, don't you?
The woman at the centre of the case is Stormy Daniels, a former adult film star who claims she had a brief affair with Donald Trump and was then paid $130,000 in hush money by Donald Trump's fixer Michael Cohen. He was jailed for that and other offences. Trump always denied knowledge of the payments, belittling Stormy Daniels whenever possible.
Stormy Horseface Daniels, no attraction. Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. I'm Dan. Hi.
At Donald Trump's golf course in New Jersey, I meet his lawyer, Alina Haber.
This painting, I think he received it last summer.
And is that real gold leaf?
Who showed me the clubhouse where the 45th president still spends much of his time. She insists he'll fight all the way.
What does this indictment mean for his campaign?
This is his life. This is no different than last week, and it will be no different next week. So does it affect his campaign in 2024? No. You know, you can technically run the United States from prison.
And he'd do that if necessary?
He's not going to prison.
These charges confirm Donald Trump's place in the history books for all the wrong reasons once again. Not only is he the only US president to be impeached twice, he's now the only former US president to face criminal charges. He'll be required to appear in court here in New York, an ignominious day for a man who once held the highest office in the land. Donald Trump is not just fighting for the presidency. Now he's fighting to stay out of jail. For some, this further frays the very fabric of US democracy. Dan Rivers, News at 10 in the United States.
Well, the legal action over that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels is not the only legal challenge the former president faces. There are the potential of charges over the classified White House documents found at his Mar-a-Lago estate last August. Investigators are also looking into Trump's role in the 2021 attack on the US Capitol building, while another grand jury has been looking at whether his call to Georgia's Secretary of State, urging him to find the votes needed to overturn his election defeat there in 2020, amounted to illegal meddling. Well, let's go back to Dan in Washington. I mean, so many legal cases facing the former president, Dan. We know already, of course, he's planning to run for the White House again. What does this do to his prospects?
Well, I mean, for any other candidate, Julie, this would spell political doom. But Donald Trump continues to defy political gravity, really. He's up in the polls against his nearest rival for the Republican nomination, Ron DeSantis, by a considerable margin. And even in polls against President Biden, he's neck and neck, which is pretty extraordinary given the situation that we're in. You've got to remember as well that he's getting a lot of money off the back of this. A lot of donations are coming in because he's playing the sort of victim card and galvanizing his base. But I think it's important on a day like today to take a step back and look at the historical context. In 234 years since George Washington became the first president of the United States, there has never been a president or former president to face criminal charges. Never has this Rubicon been crossed, yet today we are getting confirmation that it will be next week. And we face the prospect of Donald Trump appearing in court throughout this year and next year, and potentially for other cases as well, while he is simultaneously campaigning for the White House. Most people would say that would write him off as a political candidate for the White House, but he continues to confound expectations.
OK, Dan, it is going to be quite the week next week. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Here, with a bullying inquiry ongoing into the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, we've heard from one former civil servant who says people were terrified around him. Mr Raab was, he says, 100% a bully, and he claims the former Foreign Secretary piled pressure on staff. For his part, Mr Raab has always denied bullying or intimidating those in his departments. But with the findings of the official investigation not expected until after Easter, they remain allegations he cannot shake off.
He managed to rack up 24 formal complaints from his own civil servant. Will he walk before he's pushed?
This man is particularly interested in the fate of the Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab because he used to work under him.
She always comes with the usual bluster and political opportunism.
Hiding his face to speak anonymously, he describes a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere in the department when Mr Raab was Foreign Secretary.
Do you think Dominic Raab was a bully?
Yeah, without a doubt. I know with 100% certainty that people were terrified to have interactions with him, but also to interact with his office.
He talks about intense pressure on officials, describing unreasonable timeframes and work rejected for simple spelling or formatting mistakes.
I mean, his defence is high expectations are not bullying.
I think you can have high expectations and not be a bully, and I think he had high expectations and he was a bully.
And was it just him, or was it other people around him?
It was other people around him, and I was in a room in which he witnessed bullying and did absolutely nothing. He did absolutely nothing. He didn't step in, and I think that sent a really important message to people in that room.
That he was condoning it?
Yep. One of the most powerful men in the country was condoning it and saying that kind of behaviour was acceptable.
This man is one of a number of people ITV News has spoken to about Dominic Raab as an investigation into his behaviour by Adam Tolley KC nears its conclusion. One former official from the Ministry of Justice called him the most difficult minister I've ever had to work with. He saw the system as the enemy. Another former colleague said he turned a happy, productive office into a miserable hole, adding, "Not all bullies scream. They are sarcastic, demeaning and controlling." But others argued that Mr Raab's expectations were not bullying and said he was kind to staff, hosting Christmas awards and a summer barbecue known as the Raabecue. The Deputy PM himself has described excellent relationships with civil servants, insisting he always acted with professionalism, even asking for the inquiry himself.
I believe in the high standards of professional integrity. It will be a breach of the rules of the inquiry for me to comment on it, and I'm not going to do so.
He asked himself, is bully the right word? So he looked up the definition.
I read that a bully is someone that uses their influence to intimidate other people, and if that is the definition, then he was 100% a bully.
Critics and supporters of Mr Raab have given evidence to the investigation expected to report after Easter. His future will then be determined by the Prime Minister. Anushka Astana, News at 10.
Now, even having himself been cleared of using racist language towards Asian players, the former England cricket captain Michael Vaughan today stressed nothing should detract from Azeem Rafiq's lived experience. Indeed, several of his former teammates were found guilty of using a racial slur during Mr Rafiq's time at Yorkshire. For him, vindication after years speaking out about racism in the sport.
From winning the Ashes as England captain to becoming one of the best batsmen in the world, Michael Vaughan has been a sporting hero to many. But in the last 18 months, he's been the highest profile cricketer to be caught up in one of the biggest off-field scandals to hit English cricket, that of racism. Fighting to salvage his reputation, today there was exoneration, cleared of using racist language against a group of his ex-Yorkshire teammates, all of them Asian. This is him in 2009 shaking their hands. 3 accused him of making a racist remark to them, saying, "There's too many of you lot, we need to have a word about that." Today, a disciplinary panel said, on the balance of probabilities, it wasn't satisfied he'd said those words. In a statement posted to social media, his reaction, saying, "I have never wanted to do anything that runs contrary to genuine efforts to clean up the game of cricket. I truly hope people can understand why, on a personal level, I could not just accept or apologise for something which I know I did not do." Today, charges were upheld against 5 other players, including the widespread use of a racial slur. Unlike Vaughan, all of them had withdrawn from the process. Azeem Rafiq was one of the players Vaughan was accused of directing the racist comments to. Since 2020, he's been speaking out about the discrimination he suffered during his 2 stints with Yorkshire.
I feel vindicated. 7 out of the 8 charges have been upheld, and the main one being Yorkshire being institutionally racist, which is fundamentally why I spoke out.
There was only one form of cricket.
Vaughan had been a cricket pundit on the BBC, stepping down last year to challenge these allegations. No confirmation today he'll return. The game at large is also now braced for a review on how diverse and inclusive it actually is. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
Save for the sunniest spells in summer, most of us can fortunately go by without giving too much thought to our water supply. But across Europe, there are real fears now of prolonged drought after an exceptionally dry and warm winter. While much of Britain has so far escaped the worst of it, the blue marking more or less normal conditions, even after last summer's heat waves. But an emerging drought is already being felt across the southern and western continent. Orange showing a lack lack of moisture in the soil. And in Spain, where last year was the hottest for 6 decades, there is a concern for crops after landscapes were left arid. Add to that a worrying lack of rainfall highlighted in yellow on our maps, and reservoirs are now well below the expected levels.
They're enjoying a glorious spring in northeast Spain, warm days, unbroken sunshine. In truth, it's the last thing they need. There's been no proper rain here for 3 years, and at the Sau reservoir in Catalonia it shows. When they dammed this valley 60 years ago to supply water to Barcelona, they drowned the village of Sant Romà. Now the ghostly church tower, the old pathway that was built with new dry and high above the waterline.
This gives the most dramatic illustration of where the water levels are. Currently 5 metres or so below where I'm standing. The church is 20 or 30 metres above me, and the top of the bell tower another 15 metres above that. All of this would normally be deep underwater.
They're storing what little is left downstream to ensure Barcelona will have clean water this summer. Tons of fish hauled out before they die and rot from lack of oxygen. This, say the authorities, is what happens after a year in which temperatures in Catalonia were more than 2 degrees Celsius above normal.
How much of this is just the type of drought that you've seen historically, and how much is it because of climate change?
We know that it's going to last, it's going to be more often, and it's the reason that we have to invest in all these infrastructures.
That is because of climate change.
She had explained how the temperature has increased. For example, last year it was 2.5 Celsius up higher. So this is a huge problem.
Forest fires are part of life here in Catalonia, but never in March. Spring should be one of the wettest times of the year. The only water falling on this 10,000-acre blaze is from firefighting aircraft. And this is the parched land in which many farmers must soon plant. In the Catalan village of L'Espunyola, the image of the Virgin Mary is carried from church towards the fields as part of a special service of prayer for rain, a plea to the Almighty to put right the climate damage of man. Back at the reservoir, Sebastian Perez has seen his kayak rental business quite literally dry up. No tourists, no water, no income, at the spot where last summer he'd be launching canoes.
The normal years, the water ref here, no? Yeah. This year, no business.
But he sees just how serious the long-term implications are.
The kayaking, no kayaking, it's a good problem. To Barcelona, this water arrives in Barcelona through millions of persons to drink, to shower, no? But it's a big problem. Yeah, it's a big problem to the society, no, in Catalonia.
This drought will end, they always do, the reservoir will refill. But this is happening more often, and each time it seems more severely. A whole swathe of southern Europe finding itself on the sharp end of climate change. James Mace, News at 10, Catalonia, northern Spain.
Incredible images from Spain there. Now, Andrew Tate, the social media influencer who was banned from various platforms over his misogynistic hate speech, has tonight been released from a Romanian jail. He, at the back, and his brother, talking to reporters, will instead be held under house arrest until the end of next month. They were detained in December over allegations of sexual assault and exploitation. Neither has been formally charged. Now, any parent caring for a child with autism or learning disabilities will know the incredible challenges it can sometimes bring. But imagine reaching out in desperation for help from the authorities, only to have your much-loved child locked up with little prospect of being released. As Peter has found time and again in his special investigations, it is a scandal too many families are having to endure because of a chronic shortage of carers in the community.
Why did they restrain you?
This is a distress call. A 19-year-old called Josh phones his parents. He has learning disabilities and autism, and he's been locked away in hospital.
Got red marks, yeah, I can see them.
These marks are bruises. He says he is being abused.
What the hell have they done to you?
They would call him a retard, throw water in his face, physically restrain him when he didn't need restraining, and they marked him. He asked for help, he was begging me to bring him home, and I couldn't.
Thank you. Josh grew up at home with a loving family. He was taken away when his mum asked for help with his care. He's now been detained under the Mental Health Act for a year and a half. Doctors have actually cleared Josh to be freed already, but the reason he remains locked away is because the UK does not have enough carers and accommodation to support him for a life in the community.
My biggest regret is asking for help.
Your biggest regret?
Yeah.
That's quite a stark thing to say.
Yeah.
As a mother, you wanted to help your son.
Yeah, and all I feel like I've done is fail him. He hasn't done anything wrong, he doesn't deserve to be locked away.
Josh is one of more than 2,000 people with learning disabilities and autism currently locked away in English hospitals. In a series of ITV News investigations, we found evidence some are sedated and kept in solitary confinement. Now, from the NHS's own figures, we can report as many as 41% of those being held potentially do not need to be there. The government had set a target to half the number of these patients by this time next year, but exclusive data analysis for ITV News has now revealed they're not only on course to miss that target, they're likely to be at least 4 years behind. More than half the local areas in England haven't even met the target that was set for 2020. In fact, a third are moving in the wrong direction, with numbers of those locked up increasing or stagnating. The point of these targets was to fix a broken care system that was exposed in the scandal of Winterbourne View. In 2011, whistleblowers uncovered abuse so appalling the government promised to take action. Claire's son Ben was a patient in Winterbourne. He had his jaw broken so badly he will wear dentures for the rest of his life.
I feel that I've brought somebody into the world that is not acceptable and doesn't matter. And that hurts a lot.
What do you mean he doesn't matter?
Because everything that he's been through, nothing's changed.
We put our findings to the Department of Health and asked why so many targets are being missed.
We're investing more in getting the right care to people in the right setting. That's why we're investing a further 90 million, recognising that for people with learning disability issues, often inpatient care is not the right care for them.
Sarah's son Josh now gets home visits every fortnight, a glimpse of how his life should be.
Happy birthday.
But at the end of each visit, this care system still takes Josh away. Back to be locked away in a hospital he does not need to be in.
Peter, it's sort of hard to know where to start with this scandal, not least because of everything that we witnessed at Winterbourne View that many people will remember. Whatever the government is saying, it's a situation which is getting worse.
They are missing target after target, and as we heard there from Ben's mum, she's saying, how can they possibly say that they do care about people with learning disabilities if they continue to miss these targets? They set these targets for a reason, to improve the system that's supposed to be there to care for them. And I said as well, when Josh's mum says he doesn't understand why this is happening to him, and when you look at this, the NHS, the government, his doctors all agree the practice is wrong. So nobody watching this can say they understand why this is happening to him, and yet it continues, funded by taxpayers' money. What we can say is that the hospital that Josh was in, the centre he was in where his family alleged he was being abused, he has now been removed from that. That centre is now under investigation by the police, and it's been placed under special measures by the CQC. But still he languishes waiting release because fundamentally, after decades of neglect, our system doesn't have enough carers, it doesn't have enough accommodation. And if Josh had the right carers, the trained carers and the right accommodation, we know the evidence shows us he would be thriving in the community right now. Instead, he's languishing in an environment that we're told is actually harmful.
OK, Peter, I know you'll keep a spotlight on this. Thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. And Peter has spoken to Tom about his investigations on this issue on the ITV News podcast. That's What You Need to Know, available now wherever you get your podcasts. Now, after all the mirth and merriment at street markets and even the country's parliament yesterday, there was a more sombre mood to the third and final day of the royal state visit to Germany. In the shadow of a Hamburg spire that once guided British bomber crews, today wreaths were laid by the King and the German President as they stood side by side, a profoundly poignant moment of remembrance and reconciliation.
As we might have expected, the German express train which carried the King and Queen Consort from Berlin this afternoon rolled into Hamburg on time. And in the rain, a moment to reflect and remember what happened in this city in a much darker time. The Queen Consort laid a flower at the sculpture which honours the British-led Kinder Transport scheme. 10,000 children were granted safety. It also remembers those who were not rescued.
The other side are the children who were taken by trains to concentration camps.
The group of 5, so you can see in the back, is a symbol for all children was murdered by the Nazis. But it's a symbol for children living for Great Britain and other countries.
But after remembering the horrors of war committed by one side, the British monarch left to remember a loss of German life in this city. In 1943, Allied leaders approved a mission to target the workers of Hamburg's military factories. The RAF and American bombs killed 40,000 civilians in just 8 days. The ruins of St. Nikolai Church is now a memorial to the dead. This afternoon, a British and a German head of state laid wreaths and stood together in silence.
It's a strong sign for reconciliation 80 years later, so it took these long time before both countries could go this step.
So this British royal visit to Germany closes. In Hamburg, as in Berlin, they seemed very happy to have them here.
It's been asked many times if the new king would have the same appeal as the late Queen Elizabeth on foreign tours such as this one. Well, the sea of umbrellas, the banks of camera phones is about as close an answer as we will get.
Queen Elizabeth completed 121.
Pope Francis will be discharged tomorrow from the Rome hospital where since Wednesday he's been treated for bronchitis. His medical team described his recovery as fatal, with even able to baptise a baby boy on the oncology ward earlier today. Diversity, it might sound like something dreamt up after a few too many wee drams, but Scotch whisky is in part helping feed a newly reintroduced oyster population. The even breaking down organic on its banks.
Scotland is famed for its clear waters and stunning landscape, and that's no different on the Drought Firth, the most northerly estuary in the of biologists out at dawn are more interested in what lies beneath. In particular, impact of newly reintroduced oyster habitats.
Oysters are quite often an ecosystem engineer. So what that means is they form kind of the ground level. If you think of it all the way up to the top of the ecosystem, you've got the predators like the seals and the dolphins. So they will be benefiting from more fish. The fish will be benefiting from more small crustaceans, kind of domino effect.
But populations of the European native oyster have dropped 85%.
For 8,000 years, these oysters covered the seabeds of the Drought Firth. But in the 19th century, due to overfishing, they became locally extinct. Now this project is hoping to get the oyster ecosystem thriving once again.
All we're doing really is just gently sort of like dropping it into the water.
And they'll then just go right down to the seabed.
Yeah, just slowly sink down to the bottom. When they get there and they're happy, they'll open up, start breathing.
Waste.
You know, it's got massive barnacle growth.
From to that, you can see all the structure building up. And this is even
March time, in the middle of the summer, that'd be loads more.
The project will improve these waters in the Scottish Highlands, but the research is going to have a much wider impact, influencing the restoration of oyster reefs around the world. Louise Scott, News at 10, Dornoch.
And that is all from us for tonight. Have a lovely weekend. From all of us, good night.